Okay. So, because language exists, thought exists. Okay. Uh, there are controversies do exist there, criticism by people. Some people say that many of the concepts, they existed immediately, initially, and before language, like there was no language at all when concepts existed. Okay. Things existed or concepts existed, but if we look at our own selves in our real
Your
life,
voice is not clear. I can't hear anything.
okay. So, I hope the voice is clear now. Okay, good. So, yes, thoughts, uh, because language exists, that is why thoughts also exist. Okay, like if no, look at the word freedom, for example. We have the word freedom. That is why we understand the concept of freedom. Okay, if no such word existed, the thought would be vague or unclear. Okay, at the very least. Look at the concept of linguistics, for example. Had there been no language, would we be able to understand the concept of linguistics? Same is the case with signifier and signified, the concept of grammar, the concept of literature, poem, poetry, novel, drama. None of these things would exist had there been no language at all. Okay, it means that concept language constitutes our world, and language of concepts exist because of language. Okay, so this is another point in which the structuralists believe. Now coming to synchronic and diachronic study, or synchronic and diachronic linguistics, this is what we have already discussed, if you remember, when we were discussing historical linguistics. So over there, we had discussed synchronic variations and diachronic variations, or synchronic study and diachronic study. But since it's a part of structural linguistics, so that is why let's discuss it briefly. Okay. Uh, Synchronic comparisons of language, and we have got diachronic study or diachronic comparison. Now, diachronic means the study of language from the historical perspective of change through time. Okay, like change in the meaning of words over time, visibility changes in usage. Uh, Simply, in diachronic study, what do? We take the two varieties of the same language, the two varieties spoken in two different eras. Okay, like we have the the English language which was spoken in the 16th century. Okay, and the English language which is spoken in the 2020 or in the 21st century, you may say. Okay, now if I compare the English language spoken in both these periods or written, okay, and I go for the differences, I conduct a comparative study. Okay, I compare and contrast these two, the English language of these two different periods, and I explore the various changes in the meaning of words. Okay, the various changes in the meanings of words, the various changes in the pronunciation of words, the various changes in the morphological structures of words, the various changes in the spellings of words. Okay, if I compare these two periods of the English language, and I make an attempt to explore this kind of changes. Okay, this is what we call diachronic linguistics or diachronic study. Okay, simply we take the two periods of a single language and we compare the linguistic features of those two features of the same, those two periods of the same language, to find out that how many changes and what kind of changes has a particular language adopted with the passage of time. Okay, so this is what we call studying language from historical perspective, the study of language from historical perspective of change through time, that how many and what kind of changes does a language adopt with the passage of time. Okay, this is what we call diachronic study. On the other hand, if we look at synchronic study or synchronic linguistics, so synchronic comparisons of language, like how languages compare to each other at any given point in time, any given point. Okay, like I may at this very present moment. Okay, now today we it's 16th June. Okay, so if I take the British English and the American English, okay, two different varieties of the English language spoken in two different places, but in at this particular time. Okay, if I take these two features, these two varieties of the English language in the 21st century, in the 21st century, in the year 2020, if I take these two varieties and I compare them to find out the similarities and differences between these two varieties of the English language. Okay, I do not go to the past, I do not compare to I am not comparing 2020 with 2000 or 2005. I'm not comparing, I'm not conducting a comparative analysis. Rather, I'm not I'm not comparing the language of one period with another, right? Rather, I'm comparing one variety with another spoken at a present moment. Okay, or I may even take the British English and the American English, their comparison in 2010. 2010. Okay, but again, and I will go back to 2010, but I not compare the British and the American English of 2010 with 2020. Rather, I will just compare this variety, the British English, to I will compare it to the American variety in 2010 only. That what were the differences between the British English and the American English in 2010. Okay, this is what we call synchronic study, like at a given point in time. Now, if I compare these, if I conduct such sort of study, that I compare, I first of all explore the differences between those two varieties in 2010, and then I compare those differences with the differences which exist in 2020. Again, it becomes a diachronic study, because here a passage of time concept is involved. Okay, a passage of time. So simply when we compare two languages or two varieties of a language with the passage of time, okay, when we compare one period of a language with another, to find out that how many changes and what sort of changes has a particular language adopted with the passage of time, this kind of linguistics, this kind of study is called diachronic, because with the passage of time concept is involved there, with the passage of time phenomenon is there. But if I simply take one specific period, a given point in time of a language, and I try to study that language, okay, either I compare it with another language or not, but if I study it and I do not go for the historical development of the language, this is what we call synchronic linguistics. Synchronic, like in it we do not compare the two periods of a language or the languages of two different periods of time. Rather, we study a language or languages at a given time, like the English language in 2010. If we may study the English language in the 12th century, the language which was spoken in the 12th century, without comparing it to any other period of the English language. So this is what we call synchronic study or synchronic linguistics, when there is no comparison of time. Okay, uh, a synchronic study, where is the cursor, the pointer? Okay, here. A synchronic study or synchronic analysis limits its concern to a particular moment of time, as I told you, to a particular moment of time, like such as 2021 or 2020 or to 2010 16th century, but there is a particular moment of time and we are analyzing a language, we are studying a language at that particular time only, without comparing it to any other period of the language. So this is what we call synchronic language. Okay, synchronic study or synchronic linguistics. This synchronic linguistics takes a language as a working system at a particular point in time without concern for how it has developed to its present state. So simply we do not go for the historical development of a language, rather we study it in a particular given time period. Clear? This is what we call synchronic study or synchronic linguistics or synchronic analysis of language. On the other hand, we have got diachronic linguistics. So I think this much is sufficient today, because some of the students of MSc and they have already joined the session. I saw some people here. Muhammad Ikhlaq is here. Okay, so we'll discuss the remaining points of structural linguistics, Lang and Parole. We'll discuss these things in the coming class, inshallah. Students of MA first, you may kindly leave. Thank you so much. If you have any question, you may ask tomorrow. Okay, because you'll and yes, if you remember, I have shared in the group, I've shared some animated short movies with you, movies of 4 or 5 minutes. Okay, so kindly go through those movies before the next lecture. Thank you. Stay home and stay safe. I love you.
Okay, sir. Thank you.